call, email, and letter count. So thank you again. This is the fourth week of the Republican shutdown. So I'm going to give you an update on how we got there, what the Trump administration's up to, and what I'm doing to bring this shutdown to an end. Republicans are using their majority in the House and the Senate and the White House to make life harder and more expensive for American families, all while giving tax breaks to millionaires, billionaires, and large corporations. There's a lot to talk about, but my time is limited with you today, so I'm going to focus on three things: how we got here, how the administration is continuing to use the shutdown to implement Project 2025, and the impacts on the cost of your health care. Now, how did we get here? Well, Republicans, they were focused on passing their so-called big, beautiful bill, right? Which turned out to be very ugly for so many Americans. The Republicans have also failed to pass any of the appropriation bills to fund the government and keep it open legally and in general order. There's no excuse for them not getting their work done on time. As an appropriator, I know there's no excuse. Democrats opposed the big ugly law because it made a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid and cut $186 billion from SNAP food assistance. And these cuts were made to pay for tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. So the cuts are on their way, folks. Democrats also opposed the big ugly bill because it created a healthcare crisis. We sounded the alarm. It failed to renew the Affordable Tax Care Act, the ACA tax credits, which make healthcare more affordable for 22 million Americans. Republicans refused to work or even listen to Democrats when we sounded the alarm about the expiration date of the ACA tax credits. They ignored our plan to renew them, and they still refuse to negotiate even today. Instead of negotiating with us, Republicans proposed a clean continuing resolution, or they call it clean. The so-called CR is a Band-Aid to keep the government open. But I want to be clear. Despite calling it clean, the CR is different, radically different than the one passed in March by the Senate. They knew Democrats would not support the way that they wrote the CR, but they forced the vote anyways, and now they've shut down the government. And now even Speaker Johnson refuses to call the House back to find a real solution to reopen the government. Speaker Johnson thinks it's his way or the highway. Added to that, we have a duly elected member of Congress, Congresswoman-elect Grijalva of Arizona. She deserves to be sworn in. Every day that Speaker Johnson refuses to swear in Congresswoman-elect Grijalva, he continues to deny the people of Arizona their voice in Congress is taxation without representation. She was elected 30 days ago, clearly elected, sweeping election, and Arizona has now had to file a lawsuit against the federal government to have their representatives sworn in. First time in history that I'm aware of. And if you ask me, it's because once she's sworn in, we will have 218 signatures needed and the Epstein files will be released. Now, we have important business to get to. The Epstein files are important, but we have important business to get to. And instead of Speaker Johnson calling us back to the House to work, President Trump has now found a way to use this government shutdown as a vehicle to even go further with his goals of Project 2025. Now, remember on the campaign trail, he said he had nothing to do with Project 2025. Let me put it this way. I don't believe him. I think he knew because he put the project director of Project 2025 at the head of the Office of Budget and Management. And the overreaching goal of Project 2025 is clear. It expanded presidential power. It destroys the services you expect and the workers who make them happen. Well, they don't want them to exist. President Trump and Elon Musk had already gotten a head start when they eliminated 200,000 federal workers before the shutdown. And now President Trump is using the shutdown to his advantage. He's fired over 4,000 federal employees since it began, and he's threatening to fire as many more as 10,000 before the shutdown is over. Now, why did he do this? Why did the Republicans do this? It wasn't to eliminate fraud, abuse, and waste, but it was to cut services that he thinks you don't deserve or need and undermine and demoralize federal workers. Trump has illegally taken control over every aspect of the federal government, including illegally cutting and stealing your tax dollars. Let me give you a couple of examples using Project 2025. As I said, it's a sweeping document, but let's focus on some of the healthcare impacts that affect you and the people in our community. At the CDC, mass layoffs allowed the administration to carry out Project 2025 policy changes, while career staff are sidelined. For example, weakening the CDC's capacity, their authority for public health initiatives, like the measles outbreak in Minnesota. Just last week, President Trump fired 1,300 CDC staff members, just fired them blanketly. And then they had to immediately reinstate 700 of the staff. Why? Because the Trump administration didn't know what they were doing, and they realized all those firings were going to cause real harm to people's health care. And then there's the NIH, the Institute for Health, right? Grants, some still exist, but basic research has been halted throughout the shutdown. It provides the administration the opportunity to reprioritize, delay, or to cancel grants. And they continue to do that. There's impacts to the University of Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, and other important research efforts going on in our states. And if that's not enough, VA and DoD healthcare, Veterans, right? Administration, the Department of Defense, they had already cut the Department of Defense's medical research by over 50%. And DOGE had already cut the VA workforce by 30,000 people. So what are we losing? Medical research, disease monitoring, vaccine education. This administration is using every tool in their toolbox to go after Americans' healthcare. But I'm going to focus on Medicaid for a second. Through their big, ugly law, Trump and the Republicans forced the largest cuts to Medicaid in American history. Once again, why did they do it? Because they needed to balance the book for their tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. 1 in 4 Minnesotans rely on Medicaid for healthcare access. Children, working parents, seniors, people with disabilities. 19,000 people in our district are expected to lose their medical health care coverage. That's 19,000 just in the 4th district. But what happens when this coverage goes away? Well, people go without care and support. People like Justin, who I've gotten to know, who's a neighbor of ours in the 4th district. He's 27 years old and he's living with cerebral palsy. He relies on Medicaid to help him speak, move, and as he puts it, and you'd love him if you met him, live his best life. But they're not stopping at Medicaid. They're also going after Medicare, with looming cuts on the horizon to the tune of $500 billion cuts to Medicare over the next 9 years. But let's bring it back to what congressional Democrats are fighting for right now to save healthcare for some and end this shutdown. The big ugly law failed to renew some of the ACA tax credits, which make healthcare affordable for thousands of Minnesotans. Now, I recently, because I wanted to be informed on what's going on at the local level, had a conversation with healthcare professionals at MNsure and the Minnesota Department of Commerce. These entities oversee and regulate the ACA and private insurance markets in Minnesota, respectively. When we talk about the impacts of the ACA tax credit going away, what does that mean for Minnesotans who get their care through MNsure and for those who buy their insurance through the individual market? By letting the tax credits expire for the ACA, 90,000 Minnesotans will see their premiums increase, for example. And this is just one example. I wanted to kind of do an average here. A married couple, right? In Ramsey County, both age 50, earning together $74,000, and that's before they pay their taxes and their expenses, car payments, you know, food, groceries, and everything. They've enrolled in a silver plan. And in this silver plan, they pay $513 a month. That's after they use their tax credits. If they select the same exact plan for this coming year, 2026, their net premium will jump to over $700 per month. That's an increase of 37%. Now, 37% is an outrageous amount for your healthcare to go up, especially when we're dealing with Trump's policies. Tariffs have caused the price of goods to go up, housing, car prices are going up, and we all know what's still happening with grocery prices. And I just want to point out, 37% increase, that's a lot, but healthcare premiums could have been much higher in Minnesota. Minnesota is one of only a handful of states to create its own reinsurance program to help keep healthcare costs low. So thank goodness for Governor Walz and the DFL working with Republicans in our state to establish our state reinsurance program. Or that couple in Ramsey County, they would have even been paying higher prices. My point is that the clock is ticking to take action to enable people to afford their health care. Yet Republicans and President Trump keep repeating a lie, and it's a lie, folks, that we have until December 31st to just renew these tax credits and everything's going to be fine. Republicans say we should reopen the government now and reach a deal on tax credits later. They have no plan in place, nor are they making any promises. They only agree to discuss it. I'm not fooled. You shouldn't be fooled. And time is running out to deal with this crisis. Minnesotans and Americans everywhere are getting their insurance premium notices in the mail right now. Open enrollment begins November 1st, and insurance companies are setting their rates. Hospitals and clinics are preparing for the uninsured rate to go through the roof, costing them a lot of money, and will even speed up many of the closures we're already looking at. Republicans have already wasted precious time, and we have a small window of opportunity to act before people select their plans and before they make their first payment. Every day we delay, ACA beneficiaries run the risk of getting locked in at a rate 75% or higher on average. That's average, 75% on average higher than what they paid last year. And that's just not going to people who get their insurance through the ACA. Those of you who get your insurance through the individual market plan, well, you're going to be impacted too. Because once the federal rate is set, the individual market follows. Once you're locked into your plan, you may not be able to make any changes, even if Republicans change their mind and find a way to eventually reinstate the tax credits at the last minute or next year. The question remains, why were they able to extend all the tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires and large corporations, which were enacted in the first Trump administration, without any issue? They were sunsetted. Why were they able to include permanent tax cuts for billionaires in the big ugly law? It just doesn't make sense. Minnesota and Minnesota families can't afford this kind of negligence. The clock is counting down. And I want you to know, I'm here in Washington and I do come home occasionally. I'm using every tool at my disposal to hold this administration accountable for all of its actions before, during, and after the shutdown, and to get the government back up and running the way it should. Now, I'm going to answer a few of the questions that members submitted ahead of time, as well as the questions that are coming into our office every day. So I'm going to turn this over to Luke, who is going to ask the questions because he's been monitoring with them with all of my great staff in St. Paul and Minnesota. So Luke, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, so question one. Don from St. Paul asks, how determined are Democrats to hold the line on this shutdown?
We're determined to protect your health care. We're here in DC. We are ready to negotiate. We don't want a government shutdown. We didn't want one in the beginning. That's why none of us voted for the big, ugly law. We knew this was a time bomb getting ready to go off. They've known about this since they introduced that bill and the president signed it into law. We've been asking over and over again for good faith in writing negotiations. Democratic leadership has made themselves available to the president and Republican leadership whenever they want. Now, like I said, eventually the clock runs out. And when the clock runs out, well, America's really going to be speaking up and they're going to be angry about what's happened with their health care.
Question number two was asked by Evan from St. Paul and Renee from White Bear Lake. They asked, how are Democrats organizing and responding to administration that is not following the law or upholding the Constitution? What steps are being taken to hold lawbreakers accountable?
You know, it's really tough because Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate. So what does that mean? We can't hold hearings. We can't bring people in and hold them accountable for what they're doing that's unconstitutional and illegal in the way that they're moving money around or denying money to be sent to the states. So one of the things we can do is we can work with people to file what's called amicus briefs. These are briefs that go to the court. And the judges are citing them quite often, the amicus briefs that we're working on to strike down Trump policies. Just this week, we filed an amicus brief to the Supreme Court to fight against Trump's tariffs. And there'll be an amicus brief presented to the court on some of the things that are going on that ICE is doing illegally in the deployment of the National Guard. So I keep writing letters in my capacity as a ranking member from the Department of Defense about how they're spending money that Congress has appropriated, how they're not spending it properly, they're not releasing funds, and also asking questions about how they're paying for all these, in my opinion, illegal murders that are taking place in international waters. But I'm not getting a response, but that doesn't mean I'm quiet about it. That doesn't mean I stop working on it and talking to my constituents as well as to the press whenever they reach out.
Question number three was asked by Benjamin from St. Paul. Do you support impeachment?
You know, impeachment's a really important tool in the congressional toolbox for upholding our duty to defend the Constitution and protect the American people. I voted to impeach President Trump twice during his first term. And after the Democratic majority documented all of his crimes against the American people, I had the honor and the privilege of presiding in the House over the second impeachment to vote with full confidence in the case that we were presenting to the American people that President Trump should be impeached for a second time. Why not do it now? Now, there are people who are, putting out articles of impeachment, and I'll be really honest, nothing's going to happen with them. Speaker Johnson's not going to bring any of them up because the House of Representatives is clearly controlled by the president's party. And the majority of them are totally unwilling to challenge the president and hold him accountable. The majority is not going to allow congressional hearings and the investigations and the subpoenas and all that are the foundation of it. So I'm focusing on how we can hold the president accountable and working on other things. And you can count on me to hold President Trump accountable.
For the fourth question, Diane and Pamela from St. Paul both asked, are you in communication with Republicans? And if so, what are they saying about the shutdown and the actions of this administration?
Yeah, I talk to my Republican colleagues all the time. I haven't spoken to Marjorie Taylor Greene since she pointed out that the ACA tax credit was a healthcare crisis, that they weren't renewed. I haven't spoken with her, but I was just with a Republican in his office the other day trying to get some answers to what the Department of Defense is doing under the Trump administration. Many of the Republicans I serve with, they're completely happy and enthusiastic about everything that's happening. However, there are some of them that share some concerns. They aren't totally where I am about what the president's doing is actually unconstitutional and illegal, but they're concerned about some of the actions. But they feel that they can't speak up against the president because they'll actually be attacked, and attacked in a way in which Their houses are swatted while their families are home alone and they're in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of seriousness to some of the concerns that they have about their own personal safety, with some of the MAGA Republicans not being happy when they challenge the president. But I'm going to encourage, and I always do, people who have friends who live in a Republican district, or if you know Republicans, just call their lawmakers, make sure their voices are heard. The more calls, the more emails, the more letters they get on a topic, the better. And when they hear directly from their constituents, they're more apt to feel that they can speak up and speak out and not worry about the repercussions that might come their way.
For the fifth question, this was asked by several of the town hall attendees. How are you and the Democrats protecting the human and civil rights of Americans?
Well, there's a lot going on, right? We're very concerned about what is happening currently with the National Guard being deployed. And that's going to make it into the Supreme Court. We're very concerned about what is happening with some of the things what do I say, ICE is doing, whether it's tear gas into peaceful crowds, reporters being, shamed into reporting the truth by having their credentials threatened. There's just a lot going on with civil rights of Americans, and that's something that we're all working on together to the best of our ability to make sure what we can do to have folks be able to know that they don't have to carry citizenship papers with them, that they don't have to be worried about being rounded up by ICE, to make sure that people know if they, in this country, if they are picked up by ICE and they are here, whether it's legally or illegally, they're entitled to due process. So we just have to stay vigilant. The other group of folks in our country that are very, very concerned about their human rights, right, are people who are gay, lesbian, youth, people who are LGBTQ, who got married. The Supreme Court made that the law of the land, right? Marry who you love. They're afraid of their rights being taken away. So I'm very grateful that we live in Minnesota, where our governor and our legislature and even some great Minnesota Republicans are standing up to protect your civil rights. But we need to do that nationally, not just in Minnesota.
Our next question was asked by Karen from St. Paul. What about SNAP? Benefits are set to run out on November 1st.
Right. Well, SNAP has been targeted by the Republicans. It was targeted by DOGE early on. It's targeted in the Farm Bill. It's targeted in the Big Ugly Bill, and it's targeted in the appropriations bill that funds the SNAP nutrition programs. Republican shutdown, it is affecting SNAP benefits. And we're starting to see people at food lines, especially federal employees now, who weren't SNAP recipients previously, but now have lost their paychecks that are going to food banks. Real push on things. And it's difficult. Not everybody can get to a food bank easily if you're a person with a disability or a challenge in your life right now. Trump found out a way to pay for our military, redirecting funds illegally, but he won't help negotiate to get the government open to protect your health care, won't negotiate to protect SNAP benefits, won't negotiate, as winter's setting in, how we make sure that people have access to LIHEAP, which is the Energy Assistance Program. They're making some very cruel choices here. But don't be fooled when you hear them say, like, oh, it's terrible, the Democrats are taking away SNAP. Well, I'm not happy about people being affected by the shutdown. Shutdowns are never a good idea, but don't be fooled. As soon as the government opens, they are going after your SNAP benefits in a heartbeat.
For our final question, this was asked by many of our town hall participants in one form or another. How can we help you right now? What leverage does the average American have against this administration?
That's a good question, and I get asked that all the time. I get asked that by family members when we're together. I've been asked that when I've been at swim meets, watching girls' high school competition when I have the opportunity to be home and do that. People want to know what they can do. Stay informed, be very suspect of news that you're reading. Stay with legitimate sources. Don't be afraid to ask an extra question about it. If you want to know what's going on internationally, I mentioned some of the things that the president's doing illegally about blowing up these boats that he presents no evidence for. The Department of Defense, no evidence for that they're carrying all these illicit drugs to the United States when the boats are being steered away from the United States towards the Caribbean. I mean, none of this makes any sense. But if you want to learn more about what's going on, sometimes some of the better coverage is on some of the international news sites. BBC is a very trusted source that a lot of us use. Canadian Broadcasting in Minnesota. Just don't be afraid to really listen to the news carefully. And if you have a question on something, want to know whether or not it's accurate, call our office. So I just want to also just say that working on what we can do together just look at the protests that just happened, the 7+ million people that showed up at the No Kings March. I have to tell you, Republicans are paying a lot of attention to that. And even though the president put out a disgusting meme using military equipment in this meme to do it, which had to have been a slap in the face to all of our veterans and those who serve in our military. We just can't take the bait on this. We just need to keep on talking to each other, talking to your representative, and being involved in the electoral process. So we had some other questions, and I want to thank all of you who submitted questions. We received them all. They're all into our system, whether you did it for this coffee that we're having now, or you call our office, any day of the week with a question, or you email us. We still get faxes every once in a while, but however you communicate with us, we will get back to you. And if for some reason you don't hear back from us in a week or two, because my staff is still trying to do all their regular job, just send us a general email and say, hey, what's up? Haven't heard back. It's been a week. It's been 2 weeks. But we didn't get to every question, and I'm going to tell you why for some of you who might be listening to submit it. Some of you asked very detailed, very personal questions, and I'm going to have a caseworker from my Minnesota office in St. Paul reach out to you. Or if it was a fairly complicated policy question, and some of you were very, very detailed, you're very up to date on what's going on, we want to make sure that you get a full response in your entire question answered. And then there were a few who just couldn't help yourself, and I'll have to answer you in a different venue because you asked a very political question. So I'll get back to you through the campaign, but thank you for all of them. And one question that just started trickling in over the last couple of days that's everywhere is, what the heck is happening to the White House? Well, it is outrageous. The president said he wasn't going to touch any of the structure on the White House. He has demolished an entire wing of the White House now. He's doing it without, going through any of the proper channels. I don't even know who's out there, who he's hired to do it, if they even know that they're not putting the whole structure at great risk. We don't know where the money's coming from. Is it foreign governments? Is it his big donors? He's disclosed nothing. We need the Republicans to start holding hearings on what's happening at the White House, but the damage has already been done. But once the damage is done, we just can't walk away from this president. We have to hold our head up, we have to square our shoulders, and we have to come straight at him to get the answers and tell him that we are not going to tolerate what he's doing. So in the meantime, my congressional office is working really hard, and they are open and ready for work. They're ready for your calls on the sticker shock about what's going to happen with your healthcare costs because of the loss of the ACA tax credits. But in order to kind of help you navigate the system, especially on healthcare, we have 2 QR codes which are going to be put up if they're not up already. One on the right, it should be to your right, it's MNsure's website. Now, they can answer a lot of questions if you're on the MNsure insurance plan, which is part of the Affordable Care Act, the ACA tax credits that I've been talking about. Now, open enrollment doesn't start till the 1st, but you can start looking now to figure out what you want to do and get questions answered. For those of you who are seniors, the senior linkage line has now changed its name, and we have the information on that. We'll have that on our website too. Some people still refer to it as a senior linkage line, but it's got a new title now. We'll have all that available on our website for you as well. Now, there's another QR code, and that's the one that's on the left, and that's for my newsletter. It goes out every Friday. I can't thank my staff enough for all the work that they do putting this together. It keeps you up to date on what's going on in Congress. But let me close with this. I want to thank all of you who attended this live event. We know it's not an optimal time for everyone, so we pre-recorded this. Will be on Facebook and it'll be on YouTube. So if you want to watch it again or encourage other people to tune in, please do. That information will be on our website. And we'll also be pushing that out on our newsletter for people who want to be involved in knowing what we talked about today. But anytime you need to, please contact my St. Paul office. Business hours are probably the best, but we do pick up and listen through all the voicemails. The St. Paul office number, it's on the websites and the QR code on how to contact us, but it's 651-224-9191. And then, of course, you can reach me in Washington, D.C., and that's 202-225-6631. And we're open in Eastern Standard Time. So for you in Minnesota, you can call us as early as 8 o'clock out here in Washington, D.C. I want to thank you again for joining me. These are very challenging times for so many of you, feeling that you're falling behind. We need to be moving ahead. So my focus is making sure that you and your family have every opportunity to live your best life as I want Jason to live his. So thank you for joining us, and please stay in touch. All the best.